Is this the year that the Dallas Cowboys get over the hump? We're examining the state of the Cowboys roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Joe, happy Justin Jefferson resets the wide receiver market day to you.
Happy J. Is they call him J Jet? Is that the deal? JJ.
Let's just say yeah, and not dig this hole any deeper.
He's awesome. Got all the money, $35 million per. So there's a receiver on the team we're going to talk about today that's probably wanting that as well.
Yeah, this is the big deal because it boosts for the third time this offseason the wide receiver ceiling for all future negotiations. And we'll see if it goes the way of last year's quarterback market where you get another jump, right? Because last year it was Hurts, and then it was Lamar, and then it was Herbert, and then it was Burrow, and it went all the way up until like the start of this, like September. And the wide receiver market on that path, Justin Jefferson, obviously has a strong case to kind of lock in the top spot from the production that he's had. But whether or not anybody else with negotiating leverage can push that, it will be a really interesting subplot.
You and I talked about this before we hit record, and I think this deal, well, you convinced me that this deal makes it very difficult for Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, makes it very difficult for CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, because everybody wants that headline, and now Justin Jefferson gets it, and he feels like the best one. Right. He feels like the best one out of those. So now you got to chase it a little bit here, and I think Dallas and Cincinnati would have been wise to have gotten this done before the Jefferson headline, but here we are.
Well, let's talk. You alluded to CeeDee Lamb indirectly. We'll talk about the Cowboys offense and the role that CeeDee Lamb plays in that. Just a delightful player to watch play football. But this Cowboys offense as a whole, there's been some changes, particularly up front along the offensive line. They have the departure of Tony Pollard, so some big shifts for Dallas. And I think it makes it a really fascinating team to kind of study and see where their pillars are. Obviously, they have Dak Prescott. That's a whole other contract status to kind of keep an eye on for Dallas. But a really high-stakes year, it feels like, for Dallas. Coming off of the NFC East Championship last season, felt like maybe they were well-positioned to kind of make a run. It didn't happen. They lose to Green Bay. I feel like there's a little bit of pressure on this team, and there's a lot of players that, you know, you could see this tipping one way or another depending upon the successes of this season.
3 consecutive 12-win seasons. That's what the Dallas Cowboys are coming off of, all under Mike McCarthy. And all that has resulted in is 2 wild card exits and a divisional round exit. You feel like this is a team that, as I phrased in the cold open, time to get over the hump. The challenge is, I'm not sure that this roster is positioned as well as it has over the previous 3 years. And so I think it's become more on their player development, more on their coaching, more in terms of meeting the moment in some of those big games later in the season that have cost them. So how do they do that? That's going to be the challenge. And so our objective the rest of the way here today is to share our work, right? We've assessed, Kyle and I have individually assessed the Dallas Cowboys roster. We've placed every single player in a bucket, whether that's roster, cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, adequate starter, replacement level player, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, or practice squad developmental player. Every player gets put in a bucket. The numbers that correlate to those buckets are weighted for positional value. And at the end of this big process, we will have graded every roster in the NFL. And this week is all about the NFC East. So we're starting with the reigning champions, the Dallas Cowboys. We'll get through all the teams throughout the course of the week. Then on Friday, we will do the ranking of all the position groups within the NFC East. But Dallas is up today. We've kind of scratched the surface with the conversation. Kyle, as we really get into this offense, what's the prevailing thought that you have after studying this roster?
I mean, for me, it has to be Dak Prescott. And I know there's bigger changes elsewhere, but Dak right now, going into the last active year of his deal, is carrying a salary cap hit of over $55 million, right? So for me, I look at Dallas and some of the other players that they want to get contract extensions done with, where Dak is on that spectrum. I thought he was awesome last season.
He was.
I thought this was probably the most consistent from start to finish of a season that we saw from Dak Prescott. He led the league in touchdown passes, played and started all 17 games. It's the first time in his career. And obviously there's been years where they've had 16 games, but first time in his year, he's played 17 games in the regular season, right? Dealt with a couple of injuries last season and missed a little bit of time. Point being, there's a lot on Dak Prescott with how this is currently constructed, and having the ability to replicate the play that he had last year, where he played at such a high level, is going to be the defining variable for me with Dallas, because this is not a quarterback that is the guy that he was as a 23-year-old rookie who came in and handed the ball off a whole bunch and turned around and handed the ball off and just had to keep things in between the lines. Like, he is a catalyst now. And that evolution has been really awesome to watch. But as you alluded to, the losses elsewhere for a team that kind of teased, or at least Jerry teased at some point, that they were going to be all in. This kind of looks like we're letting things play themselves out. And I think for Dak in a contract year with losses on the offensive line, losses in the backfield. And I know Tony Pollard didn't play great last year. He certainly didn't play to the investment that was there with the franchise tag. There's a lot riding on Dak Prescott's performance this year for Dallas.
A lot riding on his performance, and I think a lot riding on what's around him. And as we've kind of continued to hint at, it's not what it was. And I'd like to kind of dig into this offensive line a little bit, where you have a hard time convincing me that this is a better offensive line than they had last year. We swap out, Tyron Smith, who had a great year at left tackle, for Tyler Guyton. I understand the youth there. That's exciting, right? You got younger and cheaper there, but who knows how good Tyler Guyton is. I didn't think much of Tyler Biadasz. I don't think you did either. But come on now. We're rolling with Brock Huffman and Cooper Beebe, a rookie, to replace the center. We're hoping that Terrence Steele can put 2023 behind him and look more like the player we saw before that. So, starting with the offensive line, three pretty big questions at your three biggest spots, right? Your two tackle spots and your center spot. So there's plenty to get into with the skill players, but I think step one is, all right, how does this offensive line come together? And I feel like they need everything that I just said. Guyton to be a thing, Terrence Steele to regain his form, and they got to figure out a center, whether that's Brock Huffman or Cooper Beebe. That's a lot that you're kind of leaning on to go the way that it needs to for you to be successful on offense.
I think my expectation is Cooper Beebe wins the job at center.
I would think so. Yeah.
I guess the challenge or the question there, right, is that's a new position as a rookie stepping in to the McCarthy offense. And I'm sure Dak can shoulder some of the load of the responsibilities at the line of scrimmage and help with that. And that's where having a veteran quarterback who's been in this system for several years is nice. But just the basic snap mechanics of every play may end up being a work in progress. Now, the nice thing, if it helps you sleep at night, you got Tyler Smith and Zack Martin on either side of him.
Yeah.
So that should help stabilize you. But then that goes back to, okay, now you have kind of to be determines, I think is probably the most fair way to put it, at both tackle spots.
Yeah.
Because Terrence Steele was not good last year. And I understand he's coming off an injury. But he's bad. Like that contract already looks rough with how he played last year. So getting back to that previous form for him is going to be really, really critical. And for a team in Dallas that has CeeDee Lamb that they're trying to get a contract extension with, and Micah Parsons, who they're trying to get a contract extension with, and maybe you get something with Dak Prescott. And that's a little bit of a different conversation because you could very easily create cap space. He's got a base salary of $29 million. Terrence Steele being the 6th highest cap hit on the team, with a lot of base salary that you could, if you felt better about what you had there, very easily restructure that and create some space if you wanted to. That's a pretty high investment. And, $11 million salary cap hit is the 6th highest on the team this year. So that's kind of the complicating factor of salary cap's not real. There's all this flexibility and fluidity, but when you sign a contract and year one of it comes and goes, and the player looks not to be the player they were before they signed the contract, understandably because of the injury, but at the same time, you got to figure it out. And until you do, you don't want to mess with that and make a bigger mess for yourself down the road because the money long-term is already kind of tight for Dallas.
Cooper Beebe, potentially the center. The one thing the NFC East has is defensive tackles. Here's DaRon Payne. Here's John Allen. Here's Dexter Lawrence. Here's
all the guys in Philly.
Jalen Carter and company in Philadelphia. So a big task there. We're going to talk more about this offense. We're going to dive into the skill players on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a huge win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And they got some fun action that you can get in on for Dallas Cowboys. They have Dak Prescott have his over-under for passing yards in 2024 set at 4,075.5. So if you're thinking big year for Dak, go smash the over there. CeeDee Lamb, they have his receiving yards set at 1,300 on the dot. So 1,300.5 is the over-under there. Dallas Cowboys wins. They had 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. They say the over-under is at 10.5 this year. So if you want to check out that action, head on over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Is this the part where you talk about how great CeeDee Lamb is, or?
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and do that for sure. I mean, you can make a case that over the last 2 years, he's been as good as any receiver in the league. I mean, it's him, it's Jefferson, it's Tyreek Hill. I mean, and those are the dudes right now, man. Like, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, and he set career numbers pretty much across the board last year, volume player, and I think you consider where Dallas is at now, and you look at what they have with the rest of the supporting cast, I kind of expect a similar production for CeeDee Lamb. It's Jake Ferguson's developed into a nice player at tight end. Mm-hmm. Brandin Cooks still has plenty in the gas tank, but not a volume player at this stage of his career. The wide receiver 3 is a little bit of a question mark. I kind of would like to see them find somebody else. I know Jalen Tolbert, they invested a reasonable draft pick in, but they technically have less here than they did last year at wide receiver. And tight end, at least Ferguson stepped in and made you feel like everything you got with Dalton Schultz, you probably feel like you could get some degree of from Jake Ferguson. So that feels good. That was a good bet for them. But if you look at it from a pass catching perspective, Gallup hasn't been the same player, but you still don't have him. And then Tony Pollard, where I kind of have questions about where that production is going to go, unless it's CeeDee Lamb.
181 targets for CeeDee Lamb. He hauled in 75% of them. I mean, that's an insane marriage of volume and efficiency that doesn't typically exist in the NFL. But the questions are elsewhere. I mean, we like Jake Ferguson. He was 100 target tight end last year. Mm-hmm. But Brandin Cooks, I don't know, man. Like, I feel like for the volume of passing that this team does, you'd like for him to eat into that a little bit more and be more productive. I think he's kind of just an okay player at this point. And then that third guy, there's very much a question mark with. Then that gets us to the running back situation where I mean, you can say what you want about Tony Pollard last year. Now we're bringing back Zeke. And I think we know exactly what Zeke is. It's funny. He's only 28 years old. Like, you feel like he's so much older. He's not. But I think as a between the tackles runner, he caught 60 passes last year for New England. But I don't know that there's this type of ceiling of playmaking that you would have gotten from Tony Pollard. Not that I would have advocated for paying Tony Pollard. I probably wouldn't have. But the point that I want to make here is whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the receivers, whether it's the running backs, I don't necessarily look at this group and feel like it's a better situation around Dak this year versus last. I don't think it is. And I didn't think much of Michael Gallup. Like, that's not a big deal to me, but at least Michael Gallup gave you something as a third receiver that I don't know that you're going to get from Jalen Tolbert or Jalen Brooks or Ryan Flornay as a late round pick. It's just like, where's this volume going? Dak's going to throw the ball, 600 times this year?
Right.
You're like, well, okay, 100 for Ferguson, 180 for CeeDee Lamb. We still got a lot of footballs to throw. Who's eating this up? Like, they need to be making a move to me. If this is a win now team, like, get over the hump. The NFC's wide open. You're coming off 3 12-win seasons in a row. Like, come on. Let's go to war with a little bit better talent.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do end up adding, because I think there is an opportunity here, like you said. All things considered, is it a bad skill group? No. It's just open vacancy of opportunities with an elite player. And you want to funnel probably 200 touches through CeeDee Lamb if you can, because look, he had some carries last year too, right?
Right.
So from that perspective, I think the distribution is good, but the question is, when you need the other guys to be able to collect the wins, how consistently are they going to be able to do that? Because that is such a big piece of the puzzle.
Can't get hurt. He can't get hurt. CeeDee Lamb cannot get hurt.
And maybe that's his best argument in negotiations. At least Minnesota, Minnesota's got other guys.
Yeah, we saw it, right?
George, first round pick, Hawkinson.
Right. Aaron Jones now.
Right. Defense.
All right. Yeah. Defense. Mike Zimmer. Welcome back, buddy. Welcome back. Here's switch over. Obviously, Dan Quinn had a nice run there. He's now the head coach in Washington, but Mike Zimmer taking over this unit. It starts with Micah Parsons, right? Like that's the identity of this defense and what he's become as a franchise cornerstone, impact pass rusher. They move him around. I don't know how, you really shouldn't mess with too much of his utilization if you're Mike Zimmer coming in. Like, there's a pretty clear blueprint here as to what to do with Micah Parsons. Like, continue on that trajectory, because over 3 seasons, I think he's gotten better and better every year.
Yeah, he's an elite player.
Yeah.
Right. And the impact, I think, spreads well beyond just the production. He's had 13 and a half, and 14 sacks in his 3 seasons in the NFL. But the disruption goes far beyond just, he's a double-digit sack guy, right? It's all the ways you can move him around, the explosiveness, the pressures, and getting quarterbacks off of their spot, and absolute delight of a player. I think if you include him with the edge conversation, is it fair to say that the edge group is probably the best position Dallas is on the defensive side of the ball?
Oh, no doubt. With Demarcus Lawrence and the emergence of Sam Williams, they have a young player in Marshawn Nealon that they drafted. And this is a group that lost Dante Fowler and Demarcus, the Kansas player. What's his name? What's his name?
Oh,
what's that guy's name? Signed with Washington. Good Lord. Dorrance Armstrong. Dorrance Armstrong.
Who got a nice deal.
They lost those 2 players, and you're still like, man, Dallas is loaded up front on the edge. And then they kind of played like Osa Digizua, who's really become a nice player for them, is this like 4-eye, 5-tech, it's that piece of it's very, very good. I wonder if they have enough, though, on the interior. I know that you kind of think of Osa on the interior. I like Chauncey Golson, but we need Mozzie Smith. And you and I are both Mozzie Smith fans.
Yes.
Let's get it going this year, man, because I think he's a critical piece in this defense, not only kind of maintaining the level that they had under Dan Quinn, but becoming more tough and more stout up the middle. We've seen them struggle with teams that can run the football, and I think Mozzie Smith's their best answer to get that tightened up.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I think the depth everywhere on the defense, aside of the edge group, is a big concern.
Well, yeah, but I was kind of sticking with the defensive line.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair. And Mozzie Smith we were both Mozzie Smith truthers. Sounds like he's going to play a little heavier this year than he did last year for whatever reason. The weight cut happened last year. A horrible idea, whoever's idea it was. Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
The guy is an anchor. Let him be an anchor, right? And it sounds like that's going to be in place for them. And with Eric Kendricks at this stage of his career, and Damon Clark and Maris Lufau is a rookie, and DeMarvion Overshone, who I believe is coming off of an injury last season. Those guys need protection, right? I think Damon Clark's really the only one that you look at from a stature perspective, and you're like, yeah, he can handle some trash in his face and make plays in the box. And Dallas last year was playing safeties at linebacker because they just didn't have the guys. So Mozzie Smith's impact is one that you won't just find on the stat sheet. And I know I think we had a bet last year about Mozzie Smith sacks.
Yeah, I said he was going to have more than his college total and as a rookie, and I don't think we got that.
I don't think we made it. I don't think we made it. But that's a much lesser needle mover for me with Mozzie Smith than protecting your second level so those guys can make plays.
All right, we'll talk a bit more about the defense, and Kyle and I got to have a Zeke discussion on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Folks, there's a lot of seats at Jerry World. Maybe you want to get to some Cowboys games this year or other high-profile games across the NFL. Well, then you got to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They specialize in last-minute tickets. They have flash deals. They give you a seat view. They also have this really cool deal where it's all-in pricing. So when you look at the prices, they are the prices. No surprise fees coming at the end. They give you the all-in price from the outset. Plus, when you purchase a ticket from Game Time, they send it straight to your phone, so you have to dig through emails to find it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
So you kind of alluded to this team being a team that is potentially facing a lot of transition. Did you look ahead to expiring contracts for 2025?
Oh, man.
What
you got? I've peeked. I didn't do it this morning, but I know we got a lot.
Dak's contract voids, so he's into void years.
Yep.
Demarcus Lawrence's contract voids, so he's into void years. Zack Martin's contract voids, so he's into void years. Brandin Cooks' contract voids, so he's into void years. And then you also have Eric Kendricks, who's the top name for some reason here. CeeDee Lamb is an expiring contract. Osa Odigizua is an expiring contract. So Rico Dowdle may end up being your most high-volume running back player. I know there's probably some favor to that being Zeke, but I think some freshness there in the backfield is probably not a bad thing. So there's a lot. So when I kind of alluded to at the very beginning, like this feels like a team that could go either way depending on what this season does. I think that they have a lot of players who, if they want to continue to be staples of the Dallas Cowboys, need to have strong performances this season.
Yeah, this feels like such a big moment for them and where they are in their life cycle as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what, here's the challenge with it. Let's say that you win double-digit games, you go to the postseason, you lose at some point in the postseason. You have too many dynamic young players in a Micah Parsons, in a Trevon Diggs, in a CeeDee Lamb, in a Tyler Smith, to really take a big step back, right? Like, you're not tearing this down. To me, with those are some of the most dynamic young players in the league. They're at a crossroads, man, and it's like what can we do to build up this team around those players to go compete? Because like that's a really good nucleus. A lot of teams would sign up for that.
Yeah. There's no question. I think Dallas, they should feel good long term as long as they get the contracts figured out with CeeDee and Micah. 2025 could get ugly if this year does not go well. But they are set up to have impact players and cornerstones at a lot of different spots that will move the needle. I know I already started with Dak Prescott, but like, dude has a no franchise tag clause in his contract because of how they handled it the first time. So like,
don't blame him. Yeah,
that has to get resolved at some point. I think that's the hard thing is like Dak's continuing to play as good as he's ever played. And I know he threw the interception against the Packers before the half, but like Dak didn't give up 48 points. Was it 48? They gave up 48, right? I'm not being funny right now.
48 to 32.
They scored 32 points, right? Yeah. And I know they got a lot of that, kind of chasing the game after the playoff game got away from them in the wild card game. So like I get it. Dak didn't call that goofy end of play sequence against San Francisco. They could have scored more points in that game, right? That was the divisional round the year before. Where they had like the weird end of game play or whatever.
Yeah. Everybody talked about it, but like, whenever I've watched Dallas throughout their 12-win era, I recognize that they're a good football team, but I always kind of feel like they get out physical. Like when it goes south for Dallas, I think they get out physical. And I think that's kind of a product of that Dan Quinn, like we want to be fast and slashing and, get up the field and make plays. But I thought there was just too much times where they lost that battle up front.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Do you look at this year's group and feel like it's going to be any different?
No, I don't. I'm pretty concerned about that. Real quick on the secondary, big year for Trevon Diggs coming back from injury. And, there's always a wide range of outcomes of how guys look in year one after an ACL tear. So that's an X factor. And then DaRon Bland had, all the crazy pick sixes and stuff, but I think he's got to become more consistent as well in terms of how he covers and, doesn't give up as much in coverage and it just kind of, I thought he was so feast or famine. So I'm looking for him to take a step like Trevon Diggs did after his big interception year where he became a lot tighter in coverage. I think that needs to happen for DaRon Bland. Really good looking pair of safeties, though, and Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. But also you look at the slot and like Jordan Lewis feels like an upgradable player as well. They've been kind of rocking with him for a long time. Mm-hmm. Thin. But you at least you look at corner and you think, okay, Caelan Carson, young player, like, all right, we got something there, but I don't know if we have those guys in the slot. I don't think we have those guys at safety. We definitely, linebacker as well. I'm not in on Lufau. We'll see what Overshown looks like coming off the injury, but back to that point that you made about the depth of this defense, man, I don't think it's there.
Yeah, I think that's the number one concern that I have for Dallas defensively is depth. Offensively, it's probably the offensive line. And just your three arguably most important spots you kind of have to be determined with. Zeke.
Yeah.
We had just touch on Zeke. And Zeke, you had down as an adequate starter.
Yep.
At this stage of Ezekiel Elliott's career, I would feel a lot better about him if he was a depth player. Now, is he going to have the opportunity to be a depth player in Dallas, or is he going to be a starter? He's probably going to be a starter, right? Is Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, who's getting looks at slot receiver and OTAs, those guys are going to be the volume carriers, probably, right? It probably is Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, yeah, Rico Dowdle. You and I both, I think we've talked about this. Like, we kind of like Rico Dowdle. I wanted the Bills to sign Rico Dowdle this offseason. At the end of the day, he's had 96 carries in 3 seasons, 89 of those coming last season, right? So there's like plenty to learn about Rico Dowdle. My case I have Zeke as a division level starter, and I would agree with you in that I would prefer him to be my RB2, right? I would. But like, I still think there's a baseline level of skill. He had one of his best pass catching seasons of his career last season on a terrible Patriots team. Is he ideally?
What does that say though? Does that say Ezekiel Elliott is good catching the ball, or does that say that offense was so devoid of separators that everything went underneath and we're just going to work the ball to the check down or work the ball underneath Ezekiel Elliott because we have to work to the check down because nobody else wins?
It's probably a lot of that. But like, to me, when I look at Dallas, the reason that they don't reach their goals this year is not going to be because of Zeke, I don't think. Maybe you're going to wish you had more there, but this is kind of the world that they chose to live in.
Right.
So, yeah, I would agree. Prefer him to be your RB2. But, like, maybe my best case there is, like, we have Rico Dowdle as a quality depth player. We really think Zeke Elliott's in the same bucket as Rico Dowdle?
At this stage of his career, maybe.
Ooh. He's 2 years older. He's 2 years older than Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, Zeke Elliott's had 2,400 touches.
That's 2,100 more touches.
Right. And Zeke, his last 2 years, had 248 and 235, and he averaged 3.9 and 4.1 yards per touch.
I see 12 rushing touchdowns 2 years ago. I see, 50 or 60 catches this past year.
I don't know that we're going to come to a consensus.
Well, you let us know, Cowboys fans. Fill up the YouTube comments. Is Zeke a sufficient level starter or a quality depth player?
Yeah, you let us know. That is going to do it for us here with the Dallas Cowboys. We're doing the Philadelphia Eagles tomorrow on the show. Now, I know nothing you guys are more excited to hear about than we're going to talk a lot about the Eagles after talking about the Cowboys. But every team is going to get their time in the sun here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.